showing off the microwave oven. With this crowd, almost anything could be fun. Lots of jokesters. Showing off the microwave.
You want me to take this around, or you can do it?
Actually, I was just going to ask if someone would like to use the microphone.
Do we need it? Oh, here.
Yes, it's for the streamers. It's not for us. When people are at home watching, they can't hear questions.
Stream at night?
Yeah, we stream morning,
Yeah.
night, and class.
We stream at night and dream during the day.
And people watch. They're watching you right now.
You're really not supposed to say that. You know.
They can't see them. They're staring at us.
Yeah,
Do you like this
but
color?
we're selling the data to somebody else. So.
We better have a talk about that.
Just for a minute, you believed it, didn't you?
No.
No? Damn.
No, just for a minute. I hardly believe anything you say. I always have it vetted first. Okay. Fun.
Yes, Pat. I know, but you did
Going
now.
to not say it.
Really?
Michael, well, that's boring.
So we have a little time to explore any topic, presumably in the Dharma, that you might have. Any questions? Any concerns?
Hi. This question may not be something that everybody's going through, but I'm trying to get my son to toilet train. And when I'm in there and he's like not wanting to be in the bathroom, and I've got this idea that he's going to do a potty try, then it comes to me give victory to others and accept defeat to yourself. And so my question is there, you've probably heard that kind of saying before, and is there an age bracket that applies to, or?
What applies to?
Give victory to others and accept defeat kind of for yourself, that kind of idea.
Like with a parent and child.
Yeah.
And what about it?
You have to give more detail.
What?
He doesn't get the question. Give more detail.
Oh. Okay. So
What's the context?
you mean as far as the toilet training?
Okay, so it's
The toilet training.
So my 3-year-old son and I are in the bathroom, and I have this an idea in my head that he's going to try to go to the bathroom, and he's got the idea in his head that he doesn't want to be there.
No, your job is to just wipe his butt when it comes in.
Right. No, that definitely is part of my job too.
I knew that was coming.
But my question, I guess, is I just feel challenged because I'm in that situation where I can feel myself trying to push my agenda, and knowing in my heart that that on some level it just feels like abusive, but that most people wouldn't see it as abusive, and that instead they'd see me, that I don't know, am I being not helpful to let him learn, or is it, I get confused about those situations because I want to be kind and I want him to feel that kindness, but I also want to be teaching him, things that are, good for the environment or, good for...
Bribery. It's the cultural norm.
My 3-year-old grandson.
You need a microphone. No, it's for the people who are watching.
Oh.
And you are
It's
being
for
watched.
the internet people.
Oh, okay. My 3-year-old grandson was not yet toilet trained, and I knew he should be. And one day we were in Golden Gate Park, and the little fellow goes over to the side of where Elizabeth and I were standing, and he says,
Her mother.
"Don't look at me. I need my privacy." So he could poop in his pants. I'll tell you. I don't know what to think about that, but I said to Elizabeth, I said, how come he ain't toilet trained yet? If he was mine, he would be toilet trained because, it's a very big inconvenience for the mother. Very big. And bribery works really pretty good. That's what I would use. It's not exactly Buddhist.
Oh, maybe it is. Could be compassionate.
Well, yeah, the right motivation. Yeah, kindness to yourself as the mom.
Grandma.
Don't spoil it. Bribery.
Well, I got 2 grandsons, and no, I have 3, but only 2 live close by. And they're 3 and 5. And the 5-year-old didn't fully train until he was 4. And those parents tried very kindly, very firmly, all kinds of looking for help. And I think what they learned is when you focus on it too much, you put an extra problem in. It's kind of like what we do to ourselves. We got the initial problem, then we get tense about it. That tension, that wanting something that's not there adds a layer of difficulty, or can. Now, at the same time, every child's going to be different, so you do that dance of try some firmness, see the results, try some just loose explanations, try some candy when you do it right, try this, try that, and then see what happens. I think the big thing, and it is a Buddhist thing, how much are you grasping at the outcome? You have an outcome you want to have happen, right? He's be trained by 2.5 or something, or 3. That expectation outcome is what, in my experience, causes us all a lot of tension. The boys are both trained, it's fine, there's no problems now. But it turned into a really big deal because there was so much like, we got to make a goal and lots of shoulds and,
Yeah, I can feel the goal, having an expectation and not being in line with somebody else's view of how they think their body should be taken care of. And so you just kind of know your...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's 7 opinions in the house of when this should happen, right? Grandma's mom's, dad's, the neighbors, the one you talked to at the library, and they got trained at 1-year-old, and you're going to get all that.
Expectations.
But yeah, just go with your own good sense, and then check around with other parents and school counselors. Just ask them kind of stuff of what they use. Try stuff gently, relaxedly, relax. That's really helpful.
Really cool pants that he doesn't get to wear until he poops in the closet.
Yeah, rewards. That can be helpful.
If it was a dog, you'd give it little
Yeah.
treats, you know?
We're not training a dog, though.
Well, I was going to want to talk about that a little bit. There may be some certain similarities there.
The good news is they get sick of smelling themselves and being messy after a while, right?
Yeah.
You could also let them sit in it for a while.
And then call Tar and change.
The nice thing to know is that I think everything's been tried and that this isn't like a new,
Yes.
event in human history.
We can't solve the problem, but we can have fun dancing around it.
So you can kind of do Tonglen when something doesn't work out, right?
Yeah.
And just know every child's going to be different, really quite different.
Yeah.
Like one at 4, one at 1.5. So, same parents, same house, same. They're going to be different. So having shoulds like it must happen by this time will cause more suffering for the parents
For
and
the
the
parents,
child.
particularly.
The parents in particular, but also for the child. These shoulds, drop the shoulds and just see if you can move gently but firmly, persistently. Gentle is important.
Summer is coming, and in the summertime, take his little pants off and let him run around with no pants. And he'll find out he's doing it. Does he have any awareness of that he's pooping?
Yes, he has done the "Mom, leave me alone, I need privacy" thing.
It's interesting.
There you are.
Oh, man.
There you are.
The other thing, I've worked with families and kids for a
Ryan?
while. I've worked with families and kids for a while, and one thing that also can be helpful is just over time, his peers are going to be training, and it's going to become the norm for them to have control over these things. And sooner or later, his internal motivation will kick in to not want to, stand out in that way, for better or for worse. That will kick in eventually. And internal motivation is a lot more sustainable, and it doesn't take as much, coercion from you. So you can hold out hope for that, maybe.
I actually have a story about this, a couple, but but I'm going to tell the less embarrassing one because I don't want to tell the more embarrassing one just yet. But I was one of those kids who had a hard time with this, and I had a lot of, I still do, but as a child I had a lot of anxiety specifically around going number 2 in public, like in places that weren't the bathroom in my house, and it got to the point where I literally I must have been pushing 5, wearing diapers on the road still. And one time on the way home, we still had about, 45 minutes to go to get home, and right there in the car. And I just, I was sitting down, so I pretty much just, sat in that for 45 minutes. And that never happened again because I never wore a diaper again. So worst case scenario, something a little, the worst case scenario, something like that happens, and then that intrinsic motivation just happens because then the kid doesn't want to experience that ever again.
Have a question. In the mind training group on Thursday evenings, we're working with a text called the wheel of sharp weapons. And this text is really fierce, I would say, against the thought patterns of grasping at a self, at the illusory self, like grasping at it, holding onto it. Like a lot of the mind training work is like, you know, cut that, kind of cut the set of thoughts that grasps at the self that is not there, and then sets up aversion and attachment. And someone in the class is really struggling nicely and openly with the text about he says it feels like it's mean, you know, to say cut the self-grasping. He feels like it's cutting at his own self. So can you talk about how to help someone differentiate those two?
The two you're thinking are?
The grasping at the self, which is suffering, or just the conventional self, which is just your own good self that's going around the world doing things.
What's the difference between those two?
Well, yeah, because because the wheel of sharp weapons cuts at the self-grasping, and he thinks it's cutting him, his own. It's kind of beating himself up. Mm-hmm. And I've been trying to find ways to talk with him about the difference. And maybe it's because the word self is self and self. I find it's not so easy to...
You know this person?
Yeah. Yeah, he comes all the time. He's been a student a long time at KCC.
So he has the feeling of literally being like cut or compromised in some way by virtue of, maybe it feels like a sense of denial of the self.
Yeah, like denial of it, or like being harsh to it.
Oh, yeah, that's not so good.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it might be good, right? It depends upon the person, but I think it's definitely true that it's possible to use the methods for mind training and other practices. It's definitely possible to use them in a way where we don't benefit. We actually harm ourselves in certain ways. So if somebody has that experience of that, then that's an important experience to reckon with. Let's take a moment here. So I have to confess that I had a very hard time many years ago trying to engage in the practice of wheel of sharp weapons. I think it was just really, really difficult. It didn't feel particularly helpful, and it raises in my own mind an issue that I think is important. Of the many different approaches that we have to mind training, I tend to gravitate towards those methods which feel like they're helpful. And and so we can start kind of easy with it. This person practices?
Yeah.
Okay. So we can start kind of easy with it in experimenting with the mind training aphorisms, for example, or even other practices to see if we can catch ourselves identifying with something that feels like this is myself. And so I catch myself identifying with that, like solidifying that sense of self. But it depends on some of the other things that we don't have on the table in front of us. But if that person finds themselves identifying and then finding that it backfires on them somehow, then this won't work. But if they find some simple instructions for starters of just gently noticing that they identify with their bodies, with their name, with their education, whatever it is, in some way identifying with something, and then sometimes that identification feels good, so then we get kind of trapped. The fact that it feels good feels like we could identify more and it would get better, and so that clearly doesn't work. But it's not a bad experiment to run. If it's somebody that you can talk with and you're working with them, then they can have the experience of, you see, actually that the identification has very limited ability to benefit you. And in order for the benefit to be really great, you have to recognize the experience that you're having when you're engaged in the practice. That's my sense. When you're engaged in the mind training practices, I think this is true of any practice, in fact, is it's imperative in order to go very far, in order to go deeply into it, you have to be able to see what your experience is. And then to actually, use it as the object of your meditation is extremely helpful. I say that because that's what I find to be helpful. If I'm having some kind of an issue, it could be, for example, somebody says something to me which causes me to feel like I need to defend myself, or I feel humiliated, or there's some other thing, then the trick is to put the awareness on that experience really over and over until the experience itself begins to soften and the awareness settles, and then the experience and the awareness both kind of dissolve on their own. That I have some experience that's helpful. That's it.
Yeah, I think that could be very helpful, because more as we're going through the text, his experience looks like some kind of full-out resistance and aversion to it. And then I'm seeing from what you said, we're all going to too much analysis instead of to, well, what's your experience of that resistance? And maybe just being able to sit like, why don't I really don't like this text. I
Oh,
really.
really?
No, I like it. I love it.
I see.
He would be saying, I'm assuming, instead of saying all the intellectual stuff, he might be saying, I really don't like this text. And then maybe saying to him, just experience that.
That's a good starting point.
Yeah.
I really don't like it.
Yeah, okay. That's helpful. Good. Yeah, good. Okay, that's helpful with anything.
The
Okay.
nice thing about the mind training texts and the practices is that there's so many things that you can work with in there.
Oh, God.
There's so many tools that
Yeah.
working with them in almost any order at all bears some fruit.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a question for Ms. Zopa. What exactly do you love about that practice?
That sounds like a challenge.
No, I'm
No,
just
but-
excited about it because I sort of reckon it right there with Vajrayogini when you're chopping your body up for two. But I'm wondering what you love about it. I mean, actually, I love Vajrayogini and chopping up the body. So
What
I'm
do you
wondering
love about that?
Well, I'm
really
happy
went
to tell
somewhere
you
with
because you give your body away to the debtors, and suddenly you realize that that's about the most useful thing you could do with it.
Yeah, okay. Well, same. You know,
Oh.
I mean, and the Wheel of Sharp Weapons, Matthew, you've been there, right? And I don't think you've been there since we went to that text yet. You have. Oh, okay. I wasn't there, and then, yeah, that's right. I was gone a month. The group is really engaged, so the text is really pulling, juicy. And then for me, I really experienced that the heart of the practice for me is dismantling the self-grasping ignorance.
So
And
one
whatever-
of those flying things coming at you, you're happy for that.
Well, no, I'm not happy, but but I'm willing.
Ah, and letting it just go right through you.
Well, sometimes I catch it and I'm a mess. Yeah. So
And that reduces your self-grasping.
what?
The wheel of sharp weapons coming at you.
Well, it's
allowing
just
them.
saying, it's just pointing out the grasping at a self that has led you over a set of thoughts. I really see it. Ignorance. The ignorance. It's chopping at that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, you feel better when there's less ignorance, right?
So is your experience like feeling those weapons?
No, it does
Why
none of
not?
all that. That just, I don't even
I love all that
relate
blood
to
and
that.
gore.
Okay, good, Tara.
Because it's not yours.
But we can enjoy the practice without that visualization, kind of. I mean, I do. No, not in this text. It's you'd have to read through the text. It's different.
But doesn't it refer to actually sharp weapons?
They're more like weapons against the thoughts. They're not like chopping your body up. You would have to ask him. He's having a struggle with it. He feels like it's pointing at his own good self. I think he's not being able to put his own conventional, everyday good self over here and the self-grasping ignorance over there. He's got to mix together. So when the text is slicing at the ignorance, he feels like it's slicing right at him as a person. A lot of us have that confusion.
Well, with the good, we have to slice.
Well, you'll have to talk with him.
But don't you think? even with the good, we have to slice. I mean, if we've created a self that has a goodness to it, that can even be a bigger self than one that's not.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's attachment or aversion or any story. Yeah.
Yeah, and
But-
so, but if you've established that there's a good person,
Could be a bigger problem than there's a bad person. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you really want to smash the bad one, but the good one, you're protecting him. So that might be a problem with him.
Yeah. But these texts are not for everyone, and that's one of the first things they say. That's why they weren't taught in general. So I think we felt like there's enough traction in this group from the 7 points and the 8 verses of thought transformation to take on this text. And most people are engaging in some, it's just where everybody's different. So where he is in the path.
Now, here, not in that class.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is,
Yeah.
what I'm saying is, it seems like,
Is your, yeah.
it seems like if one has established a good person, that actually is as much and maybe even a greater difficulty. It's a form of ignorance to have a good person.
A good solid person.
Well, a good any person.
Well, you know, if you don't have that to start, some people don't have that to start with. They feel they don't have a healthy psychological self.
Oh, so are you
They
just-
need to establish that first.
Okay, so are
Then
you
you
saying
take
that
it apart.
this person might be too fragile to
I
really deal
don't
with
know.
that as a
I'm not
practice?
judging all that. I don't know. I just know the person's having trouble with this text, so I asked Lama Michael for his ideas about it.
Well, you're getting mine too, whether you like them or not.
I like them, but you're asking me questions I don't know the answer.
Well, I think you could empathize and imagine that this person is feeling like too fragile to deal with this kind of a practice. I agree with you. It's not a practice for everybody. You've got to be ready for stepping off the cliff with this practice. Like you say, it's definitely not for everybody, and certainly not right away. But you could tell him that one day, or you could tell yourself that empathize with him and imagine that one day he might be strong enough to take this practice. And that might be something to say to him. That's all.
Thank you.
I'm through beating up on you. And I know you're a lawyer.
No, used to be. That's okay.
So, to me, it brings up to resonate with what you're saying, Tara. I guess the difference between the ultimate and the relative, meaning on the ultimate level, yes, like any kind of identified or habituated self should be cut through, I guess, in my practice or my thought. But not every method is going to work for everybody, and there's different compassionate ways of coming to the same conclusion. And I guess having had similar experiences with other types of practices, I struggled with things for a while and came to something different for the same purpose that felt like it was being more productive, and I wasn't beating myself up, even though recognizing that self that doesn't want to be beat up in the first place needs to be cut through eventually, So, yeah. But thanks.
That's helpful.
I am just wondering that defending yourself under circumstances, certain circumstances, is considered as self-grasping. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Am I what?
Do you understand what I'm asking?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Your question
Yes.
is, I get it. Are you familiar with that form of self-grasping?
I will not tell you.
No, she's just asking for someone else.
Yes.
Her friend.
Somebody else,
Her
yeah.
friend. Her friend does this. Her friend does.
I think there's two pieces to it that maybe make it a little richer. One is it always seems to me like there is a clear self-grasping in defending oneself. On the other hand, there could be a time when someone appears to be defending themselves, but actually aren't. They're engaging in some kind of skillful method for something. That's also possible. It's tricky, and it's the kind of thing that we love to do. That is to say, you say something that makes me feel bad, and then I rationalize something in order to kind of reduce the sense of not feeling bad. But it's also a way of self-aggrandizement. Like I can rise above your little stinky comment, that sort of thing. And so it's a dangerous move to try and think that there's no self-grasping there. It's highly probable that there is self-grasping there. And I think a more, if you're up to it, I think a more useful approach is to embrace the gift of the insult or whatever it is. That is to say, make use of the experience that it brings to you. So the actual insult or whatever it is that somebody does is just kind of the beginning. It just starts the process, right? Then you say something and I find it offensive. It's in that moment then something is beginning. And in that beginning, there's always more than one way to go. I can go to the place of nod my head, and it's like nobody really knows whether I even heard what you said or not. In other words, try to dodge, try to ignore that whole thing. Or I think the most useful is you embrace it fully. So, or I embrace it, you say something, I find it offensive, I look to see. So why is that offensive? What makes that happen? Have I done something? Is there something that I've done, something that I'm thinking, some habit that I have that mixes with the comment? It may be that what you say, that there is no intention to be offensive. It isn't always, if I'm offended, it doesn't necessarily mean that you intended for that to happen. So it's not always easy to parse those pieces out. But what's always helpful, I think, is to just fully embrace the experience that comes by virtue of what was said.
So fully embracing the experience, that means like you kind of pause and feel that experience. I mean, like sometimes maybe like, like the insult was really shocking that, like you kind of froze, like.
You have great eyes when you say that. They're spinning in your head. I'm going to be sure not to insult you, that's for sure.
Well, it's good that I'm laughing, but anyway. So So can you please explain what to do? I mean, I'm sorry, but the embrace. So
Yeah.
what to do exactly?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's take a shot at it. If we go back to the practice, to the Dharma practice, one of the reasons why we engage in something like 7-point mind training is because we do find ourselves in trouble with other people, in trouble with ourselves, and we find it difficult to work with those situations. And so the 7-point mind training, for example, provides a number of methods by which to work with those things. And most of the things that the texts are referring to are things that we would rather avoid ordinarily. I would rather you didn't insult me or make me feel insulted. Even if you love me, then you make me feel insulted. I'd rather not have that. So what the 7-point mind training does, and other mind training elements, is they encourage us to step right into it. In some way or another, the instruction varies, but to not resist it. In other words, I feel bad by virtue of something that somebody said. My first impulse might be to think badly of the person who said it, wish them harm even. So we need to modify our impulse somehow, and that's what a lot of the mind training is about, like change the way that you work with these things. And if we work with those elements enough, we can get to the place where it's kind of like playing a skilled game in a certain way, where in the beginning we have to go very slow, or we drop the ball, or we fall down or something, but in time it becomes kind of like a dance. Like if you're a trained athlete, you can do things that you couldn't do before you were trained with your body. And in the same way, we can't help ourselves from disliking the person who said something to us that makes us feel bad. But that's a very powerful thing. When somebody, by just opening their mouth and expelling some air with a word, can make us feel bad, we might be fascinated by that. How do I get to feel bad about something so small? And so the mind training provides us with the methods to work with those things until we begin to get at the other end of the scale, a place where it actually is the challenge I've been looking for all day. Nobody has said anything particularly negative or done something that challenged me. And so someone steps up and does it, then we may have a sense of like, this is what I've been waiting all week for. Can you imagine that? Is that possible? Or is it totally in outer space?
I guess if this does not come like every week or every other day, maybe you can, like, I'm just maybe exaggerating, but, like if it comes like once in a while, maybe, like in the meantime, you prepare maybe so that when when it comes, here we go, or kind of feeling. But when it comes more than you can handle, sometimes you're gonna like enough.
Yes.
So how do you prepare in advance?
Well, you prepare by noticing where your own suffering arises from. So when we engage in certain thought patterns and activities, we start to see the relationship between those things that we do and then a sense of misery, a sense of unhappiness, a sense of confusion comes. And when we get used to someone saying certain things or doing certain things, it's not so much a matter of getting used to it. What we really want is the power of it, the energy behind it, so that we can use that energy. If I feel offended, there's a kind of energy in my body in that moment. So what I would like to do is I would like to use that for something good. Like, for example, to see that my reaction, just to see the reaction might be good. Seeing the reaction and having a sense that it is helpful to see it, we might then feel a sense of gratitude to the person who just said that thing, that I wouldn't have had this opportunity if they hadn't said it. So you see where I'm going with it?
Yeah.
It's not magic, unfortunately, but it is by we study the texts, and one of the first things that we discovered, first more conceptually, is that often our own suffering is we're causing it. We're responsible for it. We don't want to be responsible for it because we don't yet know what to do with it. So I point to the person who I think is causing it for me. But that's only like helping right now. In the long run, that doesn't help. That person's gone, or, or I moved away because I didn't like them, and then my neighbor is worse than the one I moved away from, and so on. And to see how it is that we cause our own suffering by virtue of a myriad of things helps us to get to the place where when we feel miserable, we can kind of quickly see where it's actually coming from. So you might say to me, for example, you don't look good in the clothes you're wearing, just for example. And maybe I'm thinking to myself, dude, I thought I looked pretty good. And then I think, I'm going to avoid this person. When they're around, I think I'll just leave. That is just too much, all in all. But most of us will say, really? You do that because somebody said you didn't look good in your clothes? Who cares? But somebody cares about everything. There's somebody who cares about it, whether it's important to care or not. So there's so many different, if you started thinking in these terms, let's make a list of the kinds of things that feel to me like somebody slapped my face or punched me somehow or stuck a needle in me somehow that really, really hurt. What are all the methods in my Dharma practice that I understand that I could use for that? And the truth is, if nobody does that, if nobody says, you don't look good in those clothes, or I don't like what you say, or whatever it is, if nobody says that, how are you going to practice? How are you going to discover those things? Unfortunately, it's difficult to really see the nature of our experience if we always resist it and always find ways to avoid it. And there's, we can fake it. I think that the teacher, Chogyam Trungpa, used to do this a lot. Like he could insult you really deeply, but if you knew him well enough, you'd also know that it was not an act of unkindness, it might be an act of love. But before we can see that it's an act of love, we have to learn to work with the situation that is a little bit offensive. So I tell a quick entertaining story of him at a retreat where a man stood up because Chogyam Trungpa was always late. Some people think I'm late. He comes days late. Days late, like regularly days late. So we go on a retreat, a whole bunch of people, and we drive like 200 miles to this place, and it's a 3-day retreat, and he doesn't come until the 3rd day. And some people are just feeling bad. Other people are feeling like, yeah, this is what always happens. And other people are really angry, really angry. And so this one man, in the morning, we all get up, it's like 6 o'clock or maybe earlier. We all come together, and this one man stands up. Trungpa is sitting there. This one man stands up, and he says, Rinpoche, he says, you know, you do not appreciate your students. You do not care about them. And he just has this long litany list of things that he thinks should be different about the way that Trungpa's going. Trungpa's sitting there, just kind of taking it. And I don't recommend this approach, by the way. He's sitting there and he's taking it. He has a dorji in one hand, which he used to always hold and just kind of wind up the universe before it ran. And so the man finishes, and he's standing kind of in the back, the man who's talking. He finishes. Trungpa sits there for a little while, spinning the vajra a little bit. And then he says, most of us, when we were quite young, we learned, this is an inspiration from you tonight, we learned not to shit in the living room. That's a direct quote. It was the kind of thing that when you heard it, you knew you'd never forget. And, I mean, in that moment, I felt really bad for this guy.
Yeah.
I just felt like, oh, man, I hope I never do that. Or I hope I never get caught doing it. And, you know, I'm looking at, I'm afraid to look at him directly, so I'm looking out of the corner of my eye at him, and what do I see? He's standing up, he bows to Trungpa and sits down. And I'm thinking to myself, whoa, I just got something really big. I'm not sure what it is, but...
That was the shoe on the head.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah. So my sense is that there was an element of spiritual maturity in that. So some, mixed with devotion and things. And as it turned out, he also accused Trungpa of being too late once in another situation. And he got a similar response. It was in a place where there were like 200 people. So he didn't say that, but he did say after the man was standing up, and Trungpa says, after he's been told, like, you don't care about your students and all, you're 3 hours late tonight to this whole thing. And Trungpa says, I thought that if I waited long enough, only the serious people would be left. But I was wrong.
I was wrong.
Today, at this point, that is hilarious. At the time, I couldn't sink down in my seat far enough. But I was identifying with his humility. It's like, not his humiliation.
Yeah.
Like, it was very deeply humiliating. And I felt humiliated. I hadn't even done anything. It just was so powerful. And when I turned slightly to just kind of, you want to see, like, what's this person doing now? Again, the same guy I knew at that time, later, bowed, sat down. Because I wanted to... the first and second time he was there, and he criticized Trungpa, and Trungpa kind of leveled him, and then he bowed and he sat down, and he was there for the whole retreat. And I did have an opportunity to talk to him afterwards, and I was very impressed that he used those circumstances as part of his path, that he did not actually think Trungpa was out of line, but that it was helpful for him to get slammed like that, because he knew that it was part of his relationship with his teacher. So I think, actually, our work is to work with very difficult situations like that. For him to stand up and say, you don't appreciate your students, you don't do all these things, it's terrible, you come late, it's like as if our time doesn't have any value whatsoever. And then when Trungpa levels him with a comment that he doesn't really know in advance what it's going to be, he's doing that in front of 100 other people who are now thinking like, whoa, I'm sure glad I didn't get that. And actually, he's glad to have gotten it. So it was actually, I've never lost my fascination with that. It's like, wow, he goes on retreat. That's a real retreat. So there's something there that is not, he's working on something really difficult. So I think that in smaller ways, our mind training practice is about how do you work with difficult situations. We don't need the happy ones. We try to give up the attachment to them being permanent. But the really negative ones are difficult, and therefore, in some way, they're more interesting than the easy stuff.
So being slammed down is not too bad in terms of the Dharma practice.
Being slapped down
No.
is too bad?
Not
No.
too bad.
Oh, not too bad? Yeah, it's too good, maybe. You know, we want to have all of this kind of tuned for us. That is to say, I would like to be challenged just short of to my limit. That's what I would like. But we can't predict that. And so we need to work with difficult situations often until they become easy. And at the time they become easy, maybe you have some situation like this man with Trungpa, and you feel like it's very difficult for a few moments, and then it passes, and you feel happy about it. And other people are around, and that sense of that was good somehow. I'm getting something there, might actually instill some inspiration in other people who are around too. So in that way, we not only benefit others, but we benefit ourselves at the same time.
Thank you.
Yes, it's time, so we'll dedicate. Thanks. By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state. Thank you. Nice evening.
Fun.